Morning, everyone. Your Excellency, Dr. Yota Kali, State Minister of FEDRI Ministry of Finance, His Excellency, Mr. Bayena Gabrameskal, Director General of FEDRI Public Enterprises Holding and Administration Agency, officials from government and non-governmental organizations, professionals and practitioners from several financial and academic institutions, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed pleased and honored to stand before you here and welcome you to the 4th Annual East African Finance Summit on behalf of the Jimma University community. I would also like to take this opportunity to express it to you that Jimma University is proud to be a partner to this grand event where policymakers, experts, industry leaders, researchers, the academia, and several other stakeholders are meeting in one roof to discuss the role of the finance sector for the success of homegrown economic reforms and set out strategic directions that shape the future of the finance sector in the context of developing nations in Africa and beyond. I would like to underline from the outset that this year's summit focuses on financing homegrown economic transformation, examining policies and practices is a very timely and practical issue that needs sufficient attention from all relevant stakeholders, including primarily the finance sector in Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular. Dear participants, economies of developing nations may seem to be facing similar structural constraints hindering their success in achieving economic advancement. However, looking deep into the matter, such constraints could emerge to be very specific and contextualized to their particular situations and circumstances. Hence, there could not be a one-size-fits-all approach to addressing the economic challenges of these countries. This implies that Africa and the developing nations beyond should look deeply into their institutions and economic sectors that are determinant to achieving swift economic shifts but are lagging behind due to structural constraints, poor policy and regulatory frameworks, bad governance, weak implementation capacity, and etc. For this, designing and realizing homegrown policy reform measures are commendable. We need to highlight the fact that several interplaying factors may determine the successful initiation and implementation of homegrown policy reform measures. Such factors may include, but not limited to, consensus at the level of policy initiation and political support, the extent to which the general public has participated and provided the required level of support, human and institutional capacity for implementation, political legitimacy and credibility, commitment of political leadership, and availability of financial resources. Ladies and gentlemen, homegrown economic reform measures, as the phrase itself indicates, are internally driven efforts to create conducive institutional environments and legal frameworks towards achieving swift economic transformation by identifying the existing economic realities, suggesting reform agenda, and mapping future directions. Such self-initiated reform measures with little or no policy prescriptions from other external bodies should also ensure that necessary conditions are fulfilled and can sustain themselves towards the end. Relying on own financial resources is one of the primary conditions that should be met in order to successfully accomplish such internally driven initiatives. One can actually note that there are huge multi-donor support programs in many developing countries, and external assistance and loans are important source of financing economic reform measures and development needs. However, increasing the share of domestic contributions to internally initiated reform agenda is very crucial for developing nations to be more self-reliant in realizing their own policy priorities. Increase in the share of domestic contributions to finance homegrown policy reform also helps to offset any possible decline in donor support for policy initiatives and reduces the effects of abrupt cancellation or interruptions of policy implementations, ensuring sustainable and reliable source of finance. The role of the finance sector in Africa in availing the required financial resources to support initiation and accomplishment of homegrown economic reform agenda cannot be overstated. This is in line with the fact that financial sector development is inseparably intertwined with overall economic development of nations, which indicates that building a well-advanced financial system could be an important step forward to ensure sustainable development. The financial sector is one of the remarkably developed sector of the economy in Africa in the past few decades, and with also huge potential for growth and advancement in the time to come. However, such improvement should match with the development requirements of its people and the pace with which it has to achieve reduction of poverty and socioeconomic prosperity. Hence, of the many areas that the finance sector has to aggressively endeavor is to build its capacity in providing the financial resources needed to support initiation and realization of economic reform agenda. Local financial institutions can play a vital role in the mobilization of saving and providing finance when and if needed by governments for funding locally initiated transformation agenda. In this regard, governments need to work closely with such institutions by extending support and ensuring regulatory frameworks for their well-functioning. Developing partnership and collaborative framework to create a conducive policy environment would ensure efficiency and effectiveness of local financial institutions and their ability to support homegrown transformation agenda. Dear participants, summits like this play a significant role in facilitating learning ground, creating the forum for exchanging new scientific ideas and knowledge, sharing of experiences, bringing all relevant stakeholders in one roof, and building network of scholars and professionals in the field. I have no doubt that the summit will accomplish its intended targets and will be a very fruitful event in indicating challenges of accessing financial resources in supporting the implementation of homegrown policy initiatives and the positive roles that can be played by the growing financial sector in the sub-region, and indicating feasible solutions on the basis of scientific findings and tested experience of professionals in the field. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to all institutions and stakeholders who participated in the organization of the summit, and wish you fruitful and intellectually and professionally motivating 2 days of the summit. Saying this, I would like to thank everyone for listening attentively. Thank you so much.